Now on J-Span, international best-selling author and world-renowned relationship expert Rabbi Shmuley Boteach presenting Using Sinfulness to Heat Up Marriage and Romantic Relationships.
What a beautiful place to be. So I have some things I want to share this evening, and I hope that it will lead to some thoughts on your part, and you're very welcome to ask me questions. But this is what's on my mind. What's on my mind more than anything else, and this is really bugging me, is just how boring life has become. Life is so boring that we get excited when we buy things. Life is so boring that we need to spend money on garbage in order to fill the emptiness of our lives. The number one cure for depression in America is shopping. That's amazing. It's not love. It's not romance. It's not spending time with your kids. It's not even watching a movie. It's shopping. And it's one of the reasons that people have become shopping addicts. They can't stop. You know, you're walking out of a supermarket. You went to buy celery. Why you have to buy a magazine that tells you that Al Gore is a secret space alien who ate the head of Hillary Clinton? Who knows what these tabloids, but you got to buy this stuff because it just happens to be there and you're bored. Sounds interesting? Barack and Michelle Obama are having marital problems. That's what I read today as I was leaving a supermarket. It turns out he's also a space alien. Now, you can only imagine that in a country where 60% of the population have college degrees, that only idiots would buy this stuff, but we're not idiots. It's called boredom. When you're bored, you'll read anything, you'll buy anything. The boredom has gotten so bad that it has led to a malady which is uniquely Jewish. That malady was put on full display to the extreme humiliation of the Los Angeles Jewish community just today with an article in the LA Times about Jewish weddings that have become so ostentatious, so deeply vulgar, so deeply materialistic, they lack any kind of spiritual dimension whatsoever. The description of a wedding where the husband comes in wearing half a mask, going, this is a good place to sing, actually. I can just see myself swinging in on a rope. The Phantom of the Opera is there, and she was in a glass coffin. I mean, I love this. You're at a Jewish celebration, and the bride arrives in a coffin. A lot of people would say that with the death of marriage, that's highly appropriate. I know a lot of wives saying, look, I just don't have the coffin, but I do feel like I'm dead, to be perfectly honest. But when you have a wedding where a woman arrives in a coffin, they can't even open it, and she's sitting there and suffocating, you can't make this stuff up. And the whole Los Angeles has to read that we Jews are like this. I was at a Shabbos party about a year ago, and one of the guests, and he was saying, you know, the youth today have no manners. They only have a sense of entitlement. They're lazy. They don't want to work. He said, my son is 12. He's studying for his bar mitzvah. Could you believe he has the gall to say to me, Dad, I want you to bring LeBron James to my bar mitzvah. And the father says, do you believe the youth today? My son telling me that I should bring LeBron James to his bar mitzvah. So I said to him, son, you need to know manners. You don't tell your father to bring LeBron James to your bar mitzvah. You ask him nicely. These are the values of the teacher. You don't tell your father to bring LeBron James. You say nicely, Father, at my bar mitzvah, where I join the Jewish people, where I become responsible for my ethical, moral, and spiritual conduct, can I please have LeBron James at this very appropriate celebration? Why do we have these vulgar weddings? Why do we have these materialistic bar mitzvahs? Because the only thing left in our lives is the ability to show off to our friends. It's the only thing left. We don't live for something intrinsic or something special or something holy. We live for people's approval. Don't believe me? Why is it that a woman will spend, I don't know, 10 hours a week working out, but maybe 10 minutes reading a book, reading a newspaper, forming an opinion? Because that is for her. But the way she looks is for everybody else. We don't even know what it means to have an intrinsic identity. All this garbage that we read about on Wall Street of men working themselves to the point of exhaustion and having no morals and no values and ripping off clients. And there are honorable people on Wall Street. But everything that we saw with the collapse of the economy 2 years ago, where this great nation was at its knees, this is all because the only thing we have is the ability to show off to other people. Because we don't know what to live for anymore. And nature, as science says, hates a vacuum. So we fill the emptiness of our lives with the only two things that we know, and that is, for men, money, and for women, looks. And hopefully, if you have looks, you can get some money. And by the time you get married, it's not a celebration of love, it's a celebration of those two things. She has to look like dynamite, and he has to show off how much money he has. Or the parents have to. And what kills me is that it's we Jews that are guilty of this more than anyone else. You want to talk about the Ground Zero Mosque? You want to talk about problems in the Islamic community? That Imam Rauf decides to build a mosque without consulting the families, without consulting New Yorkers. He could have done it in a different way, and he probably would have gotten people to sign on, and he would have gotten approval. Instead, there's a big war going on in New York. And we always want to talk to the Muslims about their sensitivity. We want to talk to the Muslims about their violence. We want to talk to the Muslims about their lack of democracy, lack of freedom of press, lack of freedom of religion. Fair enough. But come on, are we never going to talk about our problems? We are becoming a grossly materialistic culture, a spiritual nation chosen by God to spread the light of the Torah, the 10 Commandments, to honor your father and mother, to have one day off a week that you spend with your kids, to never lust after other people's possessions. But we can't control any of that, and nobody wants to talk about it. We're preaching to the Muslims. We're telling the Catholic Church, what's with all these pedophile priests? We're telling the Muslims, what's with all these people blowing themselves up? And yet our community, there is the death of spirituality, and nobody gives a damn. Now, there's one of two things we can do to attribute this problem. There's one of two areas where we can apportion blame. One is the death of the shul, the day schools, the Sunday schools, and that's true. We rabbis have done an abysmal job of raising this generation of Jews. Abysmal. We suck. Because when you raise a community who doesn't really care much about God or prayer, and charity is only when your name's on top of everything, you got to blame the teachers. I take full responsibility. We have failed. I accept that. And we need to address that. But the area where the community has failed is in the absence of something that was supposed to replace all those external strivings. And it's called love. You know, once upon a time, men didn't get super excited about a 401k. The thing that men most yearned for was a woman, and not women. We're not talking about becoming womanizers. We're not talking about trying to get as much sex as possible. We're not talking about being seducers who can prove their masculinity by bedding as many women who are silly enough to go to bed with a guy who promises to love you but really is just using you. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a man who was genuinely electrified by the presence of a woman in his life. Look, if you read King Solomon's Song of Solomon, which we recite in synagogues every Friday around the world, the Shir HaShirim, it's flippin' unbelievable. Here is this man obsessed with one woman and every little nuance about her. She walks through a door. He doesn't even see her. And the only thing that remains is the scent. And he's trying to absorb as much of the scent as possible. And he's imagining what it's going to be like when he's finally reunited with her, whose sole yearning is to know this woman. And one of the reasons we cease to read it, it's the most romantic love poem of the Bible, is that it's just sheer fantasy. Who believes this stuff anymore? In fact, men today are so bored of women that in this whole debate about Proposition 8, and about gay marriage, I don't think there are any straight men left in America. If the definition of a straight man, of a heterosexual man, is a man who is attracted to a woman, or men who are attracted to women in general, that's the definition of heterosexual men, then there aren't really heterosexual men left in America. There are fractionally heterosexual men. Most men are only attracted to about 20% of the female population. Let me prove it. I'm going to ask the guys in this audience a very serious question, and I'm asking it to you specifically, and I'm being very direct. Look around the room. Look around the room. And let's assume that there are, how many women are there here? Anyone want to guess? 80? Something like that? Okay. Raise your hand if you see 60 beautiful, exquisitely beautiful women in this room. Raise your hand. Well, first of all, you'll notice that this guy in back's raising his hand because his wife just pulled out a gun. Another guy went like this. He's thinking to himself, do I feel lucky? Now, either, and I see this all the time, men who come to these Jewish singles functions and within 10 minutes, oh, Shmuley, and there's like 500 women there. Oh, Shmuley, waste of time. Why not? Oh, there's nobody here. And I say to them, oh, you're basically gay. I get it. You know, 500 women, you're not attracted to one. Come on. What does that mean? No, not me. I'm very attracted to women. Like Christy Brinkley, Heidi Klum, that's two. I must be straight. Either all the women in this country have become hideously ugly, and that's a possibility. There's like a ugly epidemic. There's ugliness in the air, making everybody ugly, or something really happened to men. They were compromised in some way. Their attraction to women has been somewhat compromised. Only one of the two can be true. Conversely, women are getting absolutely fed up with men. 75% of all divorces in this country are initiated by women. They're sick and tired of being married to a guy who doesn't talk to them, who thinks that offering something of his deepest self is a belch, who thinks that monogamy is a type of wood, who thinks that foreplay is something you do with a golf club. So after a while, they up and leave their marriages because they would rather be alone than be with some guy who barely knows they're alive. And let me tell you, if you think it's bad right now, just remember, all those football widows get ready for 4 months of complete and abject loneliness. My own wife included. That is the only sport I follow. You can tell from my build that I was once an NFL linebacker. That was right after I left the NBA.
More with Rabbi Shmuley Boteach after this. Now back to Rabbi Shmuley Boteach.
How did the relationship between the sexes become so benign? How did it cool off to the point where people can date and date and date and never fall in love? I often remark that even the language of love has become so commercial. It's become so impotent. Look at these weird words we use for love. Once upon a time, couples used to court. And in courting, they would create this court. It was a spatial connotation. They were creating a home. From there, it went to not courting, but dating. It was no longer a spatial connotation. It was now a temporal connotation. I'm not building something. I'm just spending time with someone. I'm dating them. And the last time I checked, dating is something a scientist does